Unspoken. Freezer chest rules. Every 1950s mother knew that fed families before every dinner needed a delivery app. Strongest. Number 11. The flat package rule. The package was not pretty. That was why it worked. Jane would stand at the kitchen table after shopping, sleeves pushed back, dividing food before it ever reached the freezer. A stew portion did not go in as a round lump. Ground meat was not thrown in as a thick brick. Soup was not frozen in one awkward mountain that would take half a day to thaw. She pressed things flat. A meal-sized parcel was wrapped, shaped, labeled, and made to behave. Flat packages stacked better in the chest freezer. They froze more evenly. They thawed with less drama. They made the cold space visible instead of turning it into a buried cave. That was not decoration. It was geometry. The 1950 General Electric ad sold the home freezer as a serious storage machine, big enough to hold hundreds of pounds of food. But capacity only mattered if the food could be found, moved, and used. A chest freezer without order became a frozen attic. Today, that same old geometry comes back as freezer organizer bins, stand-up freezer bags, stackable meal prep containers, and specialty storage systems. Even the freezer bag category has become a modern market measured in billions of dollars. The old kitchen understood the same principle with paper, hands, and a table. Of course, cooked food still had to be cooled properly before freezing. Cold was useful, not magical. But Jean knew the first rule before anyone sold her a storage system. She did not buy an organizer. She made the food behave. Number 10. The pencil date rule. Before the app reminded her, the pencil did. A strip of masking tape went across the package. Then came the small handwriting. Chicken pieces, March 12th. Green beans, July. Stew for Tuesday. Sometimes the letters were careful. Sometimes they leaned because the pencil was dull and someone was calling from the next room. But the date was there. In 1957, the U.S. Department of Agriculture published Home Freezing of Fruits and Vegetables, part of a wider world of extension bulletins and home economics guidance that treated household freezing as a skill. The freezer was not supposed to be a mystery box. It needed contents, dates, and rotation. That little label solved a human problem modern technology still tries to solve. Memory fails. Frozen food stops looking like food. A wrapped parcel becomes anonymous. A container without a date becomes a small argument between hope and suspicion. The pencil date rule made food visible again. Modern life now offers freezer label kits, grocery list apps, smart fridge inventory features, barcode systems, and meal planning subscriptions. Some are useful. But the principle is older than the screen. Know what it is. Know when it went in. Use the older food first. A date label does not make badly handled food safe. It is not a magic seal. It is a planning tool, a quality tool, a little household truth-telling device. Jean's pencil did not need charging. It did not update. It did not ask for a password. The smartest device in the freezer was a pencil. Number 9. The berry tray rule. You could hear the berries before you saw them. In summer, Jean spread them across a tray in a single layer, not piled into a container where they would freeze into one purple block. The tray went into the freezer first. Later, when the berries were hard, they were poured into a carton or bag loose enough to rattle. That sound mattered. It meant she could take 1 cup for pancakes, a handful for a sauce, a few for a child's bowl without thawing the whole season at once. It meant August could appear in February without wasting half the fruit. The National Center for Home Food Preservation still describes this tray packing method. Spread fruit in a single layer, freeze it, then package it so the pieces stay loose. The mechanism is simple. Separate pieces freeze separately. Separate pieces can be used separately. Portion control was not a modern invention. It was sitting on a cold metal tray. Today, factories sell this as convenience. Individually quick frozen fruit, smoothie packs, pre-portioned freezer cubes, subscription smoothie bags. The modern package is colorful. The old tray was plain. But the logic is the same. A 1984 presidential proclamation later noted that frozen vegetables, fruit, meat, and fish had first been packaged and offered to consumers back in 1930. By the 1950s, the American freezer was bringing part of that industrial idea into the home. Jane did not use the factory's language. She used the family's hunger. The factory called it individual quick freezing. She called it not wasting berries. Number 8. The blanch first rule. The step everyone wanted to skip was the step that protected the vegetable. The kitchen would steam before the freezer filled. Green beans went into boiling water, then came out bright and hot, then cooled before packing. Corn, peas, greens, each had its own timing. It looked like extra work because it was extra work. But it had a reason. Blanching slows enzyme activity that can damage color, flavor, and texture during frozen storage. The freezer stops many things, but it does not erase what happened before the food went in. A careless vegetable could come out months later, dull, tough, or strange tasting, even if it had technically stayed frozen. That was why USDA home freezing guidance mattered. The 1957 home freezing of fruits and vegetables did not treat mothers as sentimental cooks. It treated them as people managing food chemistry at a kitchen sink. Modern frozen vegetables often arrive already prepared for us. Steam-in-bag peas, frozen vegetable blends, ready side dishes, seasoned microwave packs. The modern aisle industrialized a step that home economists once taught at the household level. There is nothing wrong with buying the modern bag. It can save time, and time has value. But the older rule reveals something sharper. The convenience did not begin with the package. The package captured a method. Jane did not blanch because she was old-fashioned. He blanched because the freezer needed help. The freezer preserved the food. The boiling water preserved the quality. Number 7 is where this stops being quaint. Because the next rule was not about nostalgia at all. It was about air, damage, and a problem modern brands still charge us to prevent. Number 7. The air out wrap rule. Freezer burn was not a mystery. It was air getting paid back. Jane knew it before she knew the science words. Meat wrapped loosely came back dry at the edges. Bread left with a gap tasted tired. A package with a little air pocket seemed harmless going in, then punished the family weeks later. So she pressed. Her hands moved across the freezer paper until the parcel was tight. The corners folded down. The tape held. If she used foil, it was not for shine. It was for protection. Reynolds says the first box of Reynolds Wrap aluminum foil was sold in 1946, just in time for a generation of American kitchens learning that wrapping was not decoration. It was preservation. The National Center for Home Food Preservation explains the mechanism clearly. Freezer burn is surface dehydration, often caused by improper wrapping, and packages should be sealed airtight with as much air removed as possible. That is what Jean was doing at the kitchen table. Not guessing. Not being fussy. Controlling air. Today, the same principle returns as vacuum sealers, double-zip freezer bags, reusable silicone pouches, and packages that promise to help prevent freezer burn. Some of them work well. But the idea was older than the branding. Freezer burn is usually a quality problem, not automatically a safety problem. But quality mattered when every roast, loaf, and bag of vegetables represented money already spent. The modern product changed. The old enemy did not. Nobody could patent pressing the air out. The freezer chest was never just a cold box. By number 7, the pattern is already visible. The old rules had chemistry inside them: air, moisture, temperature, timing, surface area. They were not romantic little gestures. They were working knowledge passed through hands. Modern industry did not need that knowledge to be false. It only needed the household to stop practicing it. Once the habit disappeared, the same principle could return as a package, a device, a refill, a drawer, a kit. The old freezer did not fail because it was simple. It worked because the simplicity had rules. Number 6, the sale meat parcel rule. Jean did not buy meat for tonight. She bought meat for 6 Tuesdays. A roast on sale did not stay a roast for long. On the kitchen table, it became stew meat, soup bones, sandwich slices, and 2 wrapped portions for later. One purchase became several decisions made in advance. The freezer did not merely store the bargain. It translated the bargain into dinners. That mattered. The 1950 General Electric freezer advertisement promised that a family could buy foods when they were in season or on sale. But a sale price only helped if the food did not disappear into a frozen lump nobody wanted to thaw. Jean knew that a large piece of meat had to become meal-sized parcels before it became useful. The mechanism was practical and behavioral. Smaller portions froze faster, thawed more safely when handled correctly, and reduced the temptation to defrost too much. They also removed one of dinner's heaviest questions. What are we making? There it was, already answered in pencil. Today, that old household conversion has become a modern economy of meat subscription boxes, bulk club packs, frozen family meals, and meal bundles. Convenience is sold as planning already done. But Jean's freezer was doing that work with paper, tape, and a sale circular. This was not about glorifying hardship. It was labor. It took time. But the intelligence was real. A bargain at the store was only the beginning. The bargain was in the wrapping. Number 5 is where the old routine starts looking sharper than the modern aisle. Because the freezer did not save money just by holding food. It saved money only when the household made a promise to eat what was already there. Number 5, the second meal rule. This is where the freezer stops looking quaint. Leftover stew did not go into the freezer as guilt. It went in as a future supper. A small container of chili was not a failure to finish dinner. It was Thursday. Waiting. A few slices of roast were not scraps. They were sandwiches, gravy, soup, or hash. But Jean knew the dangerous lie of leftovers. If you freeze them without a plan, you have not saved food. You have only delayed throwing it away. So the second meal rule had 2 parts. Freeze it in a useful amount, and write down when it would return. Stew for Tuesday. Beans for lunch. Broth for rice. Pie crust for Sunday. The National Center for Home Food Preservation advises using older frozen foods first and replacing what is used. That simple rotation principle turned storage into a loop. Food went in. Food came out. The freezer stayed alive. Modern life now sells the missing loop in many forms: meal kits, ready meals, food waste apps, delivery apps, and heat and eat subscriptions. U.S. meal kit delivery services were estimated at about $15.29 billion in 2025. That number is not just about food. It is about the value of having the next meal decided. The old second meal was not glamorous. It did not arrive in a box with recipe cards. It asked the household to remember what had already been paid for. Leftovers had to be cooled quickly, frozen properly, and reheated safely. The rule was practical, not magical. Still, the sting remains. The freezer was a promise to eat what you already paid for. Number 4. The soup and broth cube rule. The smallest frozen thing in the house could save the whole dinner. Not the roast. Not the casserole. Not the big wrapped package at the bottom. Sometimes it was a little container of broth, a frozen spoonful of gravy, a cup of soup base, or dripping saved from Sunday and held for a day when dinner needed help. Jean kept these little pieces beside the larger meals. They looked almost too small to matter. But they changed rice. They rescued leftovers. They stretched vegetables into soup. They made gravy possible when there was no roast left on the table. This was the freezer as a kitchen memory. The mechanism was simple. Small portions thawed faster. Small portions prevented waste. A cup of broth could be used without opening a whole container. A saved sauce could become the bridge between yesterday's food and tonight's meal. Home freezing guidance from USDA and Extension Services treated preservation as a household skill, not just a shopping category. And this rule lived in that same world. Save the usable part before the modern aisle teaches you to buy it again. Today, the replacement is everywhere. Broth cartons, bouillon cubes, concentrated stock cups, frozen sauce cubes, meal starters, flavor bases, and pre-seasoned cooking kits. Many are convenient. Some are genuinely useful. But the old kitchen already understood the central idea. Flavor was not always something to purchase. Sometimes it was something to remember. Jean did not buy a meal starter. She saved one. The final 3 are where this stops being nostalgia and starts looking like a business model. Number 3. The freezer thermometer rule. The number mattered because cold was not enough. In Jean's basement, a small thermometer could tell the truth better than the hum of the machine. The freezer sounded steady. The lid felt cold. Frost gathered along the edge. But none of that proved the food was being held correctly. The rule was 0 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The National Center for Home Food Preservation advises using a freezer thermometer to make sure a freezer is holding 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. It also warns that adding too much unfrozen food at once slows freezing, with common guidance allowing only about 2 to 3 pounds of unfrozen food per cubic foot of freezer space in 24 hours. That sounds technical because it was technical. The freezer was not magic. At 0 degrees Fahrenheit, microorganisms are prevented from multiplying. But freezing does not erase unsafe handling. Food still had to be wrapped, cooled, loaded carefully, and thawed safely. Jean may not have used laboratory language, but she understood discipline. A chest freezer did not reward carelessness just because it was cold. Today, that same attention comes back as smart fridges, temperature sensors, app alerts, connected appliances, and service plans. Some of those tools are helpful, especially when a freezer fails. But the old principle was not digital. It was attention made visible. The modern fridge sends a notification. The old freezer taught watching. The rule was not freeze it. The rule was freeze it correctly. Number 2. The lid list rule. The freezer list was not a list. It was a brake pedal. Jean's paper inventory sat taped inside the lid or beside the freezer handle. Peas, pork chops, berries, broth, stew, pie crust. A pencil hung nearby, sometimes tied with string, because a missing pencil could break the whole system. When something went in, it was written down. When something came out, it was crossed off. Before the grocery list was made, the freezer list was checked. That single sheet prevented a quiet, modern problem: invisible food. The National Center for Home Food Preservation's Older Food First guidance supports the same rotation principle. Food has to move. A freezer that only receives food becomes a graveyard. A freezer that is inventoried becomes a pantry with memory. The mechanism was behavioral. Visibility changes spending. When the household sees what it already owns, it is less likely to buy around it. When food is hidden, the store gets another chance to sell the same dinner twice. Today, the replacement comes as grocery apps, smart fridge cameras, meal planning subscriptions, delivery platforms, and digital inventory tools. Meanwhile, U.S. online food delivery generated about $52.67 billion in 2024. That figure is not only about hunger. It is also about the expensive moment when nobody checks what is already in the house. This was not moral superiority. Modern convenience can be necessary. Some nights are too long, some jobs are too hard, and some families need help, fast. But the old list did one thing the app rarely asks first. The list did not store food. It stored restraint. Number 1 is not just another freezer rule. It is the rule underneath all the others. The pause before spending again. Number 1. The check the freezer first rule. Before she bought dinner, she visited dinner. Jean lifted the freezer lid before grocery day. Before writing the shopping list. Before deciding that there was nothing to eat. Before sending anyone to the store. Before spending again. That was the whole system. Not the freezer paper. Not the thermometer. Not the berries on the tray. Not the broth in little containers. Those things mattered because they served one larger rule. Check what the household already has before asking what it should buy next. The 1950 General Electric freezer ad sold the home freezer as a way to buy food in season or on sale and keep it for later. The National Center for Home Food Preservation later expressed the same practical loop in modern guidance. Keep the freezer working properly. Use older food first, and replace what is used. The appliance was never the intelligence. The habit was. The mechanism was a pause. A pause reduced duplicate buying. A pause made leftovers visible. A pause turned a sale into future meals instead of frozen clutter. A pause lowered the panic that makes convenience feel like the only answer. And this is where the modern contrast becomes uncomfortable. U.S. online food delivery generated about $52.67 billion in 2024. U.S. meal kit delivery services were estimated at about $15.29 billion in 2025. USDA has estimated that 30 to 40% of the U.S. food supply is wasted. Not all of that is solved by a freezer. Not even close. But the old freezer rule aims directly at one small daily leak: buying while forgetting. Modern platforms are built to answer the hunger question quickly. What can arrive now? Jean's freezer asked a slower question first. What is already here? That old question was free. That was its commercial weakness. Number 1 was not a freezer trick. It was the pause modern industry had to remove.